Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero, and today we publish our 400th episode. What great fun it's been meeting many of our favorite top performers in such a wide variety of fields, and I really have Pete to thank since he works tirelessly to keep up the volume while I develop a new show. And of course, Scott Huesing, who at first was a guest on the show as one of those favorite top performers and has become a regular and fantastic co-host. Now, to put 400 episodes into context, consider that the average lifespan of a podcast is a whopping 7 episodes. 7. Of course, Adam Carolla is deep into the thousands, and so is Joe Rogan, but I have to look at TV to find comparisons of shows that went into and beyond 400. So, Law & Order had 456, Ozzie and Harriet had 435, Bonanza had 431. We'll catch those by spring. The Simpsons is the longest-running TV show in history, approaching 700 episodes and still going strong. But the king of longevity in radio broadcasting is Oscar Brand. His show, Folk Song Festival, ran in Canada for 70 years and 291 days. The first broadcast aired on December 9th, 1945. And it ran continuously every week until its final broadcast on September 24th, 2016, just before Oscar Brand passed away. So thanks for going on this ride with us. Thanks for commenting on the show to help us make it better, and I hope you keep enjoying it. Here's number 400.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Crew.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl Andy.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner. Hey, this is Pete A. Turner, co-host of the Break It Down show and also Album Fights and also Popping the Bubble and producer of a number of other podcasts. And you're listening to the Break It Down show.
And now, the Break It Down show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, we are. We're on the Break It Down show, and I'm Scott Huesing, the host, thanks to Pete Turner, which is his show. I love co-hosting with Pete, but we are doing episode 400.
Celebrating a lot of things. Or also, about a year ago we met, and it's also been your birthday.
Yes,
and my
true.
birthday's on the horizon, so.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, and as we were just talking about, it seems like it's been much longer that we've known each other because we've covered so much ground.
Yeah.
We've met so many new people this year. It's really been a phenomenal year, and to capture some of those things, and we'll talk about that in the show, I think, is, what we've gained through our relationship and others and people coming in and out of our lives, and it's just a really remarkable thing. And I think people have listened to me, they've listened to you about how important it is to share great stories. And that's what I love about you, man, is you're you're not only a phenomenal storyteller and interviewer to get people to share so much of themselves, but you're just a great, kind person, man. I love telling the airport story, you picking me up. Have I shared that on air before?
I think you have.
I think I have too, but you're the only guy that's ever thanked me for allowing you to pick me up from the airport. No one does that but Pete Turner.
Well, it keeps me feeling like I'm contributing in some way, because it's easy to get hard on all of ourselves in general, and I'm hard on myself like everybody else, I'm not doing enough. I haven't given enough back. I don't make enough money. I don't. But it turns out, like when you slow down and you look back, that's why I love doing these kinds of shows. Like I don't mind like 400. Okay, great. Didn't we just do the 200? Yeah, we did. But we've been working hard this whole year, and it's important to look back and go. PR companies call me and say, "We got so and so on the line. Can you have them on the show?" Just that metric alone is such a big thing and a big accomplishment. It's easy to blow by that and not realize all of the things that we've done. You wrote a book. That's old news. You went out on the road and you sold the hell out of a book everywhere, all over the place, always on the air talking about it. That is an enormous endeavor. So I like to try to think about the things that I do, and I like when plenty of people say, you said something to me one time, and I think, oh shit, I hope it wasn't dumb. But then it ends up being a good thing because I try to be true to myself, and I'm glad that that's a good mark. The compliment's great, but just for me internally, like, I'm doing the things that I want to do. I do want to be kind. I do want to try to reduce my amount of judgment. I want to be hard to offend. I don't want to offend people. And I think if I do those things, I'm contributing, and I like that.
So what is the one thing over 399 episodes for a personal characteristic, something you think you were bad at before that you've really evolved and gotten better at now?
I think what I'm better at now, I'm a lot better at, boy, there's so many things. But I think once the show went to 4 times a week, that was a big commitment. And I've gotten better at that. And I think that not only do I think I can put out a lot of content, and that's a marketable trait, but other people are seeing that now and saying, whoa, here's a guy who, it's great to want to do a podcast, but it's a lot of work. I mean, just look at how much planning I do. You see probably a third of the planning that I do, and all the emails that don't come back, it's a load of work. So I think that is a good thing that I've developed, is the ability to say, without a doubt, to anybody in the marketplace, you may want to do a podcast, but if you need to get it out the door, I'm the guy that can do it.
That is something that's extremely challenging and also demanding on your time. I think that in a recent interview we did with Ryan Weaver, he used a great analogy is, hey, that one picture on Instagram that you see, there was 9 hours that went into that one picture. And every 50-minute episode of the Break It Down show or Popping the Bubble that you listen to and you enjoy on this channel, there's hours and hours. I think it's a basic analogy of, I liken it to being an instructor. For every 1 hour of instruction, there's at least 3 hours of prep that a teacher uses to make sure that the students, or in your case, the listener, really get the most out of.
Yeah. Because you think about the things that are invisible costs. Like, I've been watching these Dan Rather interviews because I'm always trying to figure out what a good interviewer. I can tell you who they are and who I enjoy, but why? What skills, what tools are they using, and then how do I apply them, or how do I go, I'm leaving those tools alone. That's just not my strength. Just think about that, like getting better or processing all the, yes, we don't have a singular theme because we illustrate life, but taking all those perspectives and then turning them into thoughts that are coherent and go, this is how these things jump across all these disciplines. That all takes time. That's all part of that whole hosting and illustrating thing that we have to do to make the show matter.
So every podcast or every broadcast, for that matter, does have a theme, I think, whether it's political, self-help, how to do it.
Yeah.
What's Pete Turner's theme for the Break It Down show?
I like to illustrate life, things that are interesting to me, and who's defined by one thing, If Joe Rogan can have on whoever he wants, how come he gets to do it and why can't I? I'm not just a combat guy. I'm a spy. I'm not just that. I'm an academic guy. I'm also, a former athlete when my body worked. I've got all these things. I'm a dad. I'm someone's significant other. I'm a lot of things.
I love that. I used that recently with a friend of mine, and we likened it to going to the optometrist. You sit down in the chair and he puts the thing, whatever that thing is, up to your eyes, and he switches the lenses. He goes, this one? No, or this one.
Yeah.
Not so much this, but this. So Pete's like, not so much a soldier as he is a spy.
Yeah.
Not so much a storyteller is a share of other people's stories.
Right.
Or, so there's so many different levels, so many different lenses that flip up and down, and I'm moving my hands in front of my eyes right now, like the thing in the optometrist's office. But that's Pete, and that is really, it is an acquired skill. So, from episode 1 to 400, that's remarkable to be able to do that, man.
It's incredible too. And you look at the pedigree of the people that we've had, whether they're known or not, there's real impactful people in that body of work that are contributing to our lives if we just listen to what they're doing and go, wow, I can use some of that. I mean, every episode has gems in it. Every single one.
I don't think there's a single episode that I've listened to or that I've been fortunate to co-host with you where I don't take some small piece of that and then weave that into something I talk about or continue to share that story. I think there's so many second and third order effects of being in this type of entertainment field where everything we're talking about now, and Pete and I talked about this before the show. We're like, hey, what are we going to talk about in episode 400? And we thought, well, we're going to talk about these things, but really we wanted to share with the listeners today just the experiences and the impact that this type of profession and the passion, again, for doing what you love and really making an impact on those around you, how that really is super fulfilling for anybody. And I think those are questions that are important, not only to us as veterans, being me and Pete, who are sitting here at my ranch again in Southern California, to as entertainers and artists to really try and communicate stories that are important to people, that are entertaining to people, and giving them something that they can take away with and say, God, you know what? I can use that. And to anyone listening, anything we say, nothing's original. You can use any of it, and you can quote any of it, because that's the beauty of what we do is to share those stories. And I think you have more experience in that area of doing interviews with so many diverse people.
Sure.
And, talk a little bit about the diversity of why you approach certain subjects to get on your show. What is that one thing or those things that say, I got to get that person on the show?
So when I'm looking at what I want to have on, I might go to Barnes and Nobles and look at the books on the tables and go, who in here? That's how we got Lynn Vincent. It's like, oh, okay, great. Here's the USS Indianapolis. I love this story. It's so tragic. And, I know we can probably get this person. Or someone talks about, so we just did, and the show hasn't even posted yet. We just did an interview in my hometown with a refinery we call Valero. And there's a lot of people that hate it because they hate big oil. Whether the hell big oil is. And they hate it because they, quote unquote, pollute. Okay, well, that's great. But what are we talking about? Like, are you mad because you drive a car and you have petroleum products around you all the time and you feel bad for yourself? Or are you mad because you don't understand who they are? Or are they really this evil mustache twisting entity? Let's go find out. And then the ability that I bring is that I can actually, and not all the time, but I can go and I can get that meeting because I'm not trying to get them. I'm trying to have a conversation so I can better understand who they are. And so when you look at the 400 shows, there's a lot of that where it's like, I don't need to talk to Andy Summers about being in the police. I need to talk to him about art and where he is and where he's pushing because he's so far ahead of everybody artistically. You're not supposed to always get him. So how do I bring him a little bit back closer to the audience? Because he's doing what inspires him. And he's a 70-something-year-old man who doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do and hasn't had to for decades. So what inspires that guy?
So how do you balance the content on any show in the realistic perspective of salacious sells and understanding that just like me as a writer, I have to write what I love to write. I have to write about what people want to hear.
Right.
And there's this industry term that a lot of people don't talk about. It's called the give a shit factor. So, where do you balance that as far as, well, I'm going to get this guy on, I'm going to ask him these questions because it's going to really generate a lot of interest or it's going to be controversial? Because I don't really look back at any of the shows you've done and think, oh, it's super political, super controversial. And, that's a balance. And some people really cross the line and they say, well, I'm going to talk about the blood and guts and the glory and this and the scandal because that's what mainstream media, that's what social media, they eat that stuff alive, man. How do you, is that just like your moral compass? I
mean, it's my moral compass. It's part of I always want to improve my character and I'm definitely trying to collect wisdom because heck, I'm not getting faster and more like lithe in my body. I've got to build my brain and my character, and so I definitely look for those things that are not as easy. Because you know as well as I do that tension, the friction that you talk about, these things are the things that, like Mark Pattison walks up mountains to get his clarity, to keep himself focused. So how do you stretch yourself? And it's you put yourself in front of someone who you don't, like these cosmologists that we've been talking to. I don't know anything about cosmology compared to them. Like the gap is enormous. I know about some terms, but that forces me, one, to spend time in the literature, but two, to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I talk about miscomfort a lot. It's not that you're uncomfortable. It's just you're not familiar with discomfort. And so the more I can do that, the more I can relate to people. Because the big people, the big thing that we all struggle with is we're all bigots. We all are intolerant towards something or someone or and don't tell me your form of bigotry is better than mine. The evolved person goes, I'm a bigot. I know my first response is likely to be wrong, and I have to be fallible enough to go, I'm probably an asshole when I think this. Let me slow down. And so let me give you an example. Like Shaka Senghor, he's been on the show in the past, but he's also working on this Prison Chronicle thing, and we were talking, and it's stuck with me. He's did a lot of time in prison, murdered somebody, and he brought all this wisdom out of prison. So, okay, I want that. I want to grab that. And he said, every person is rehabilitatable. That's where you set your watch, right there. And then you fail every now and then to get that person right. And who knows why, because it's hard work and it's multivariate. But if you start there as saying every person is redeemable, now you can spit the bit and go, what about Charles Manson? And he sees what, because I said, I need to ask you this because it's the obvious question. What about Charles Manson? He's an evil murderer who went around. He's like, how many people did he kill in the last 40 years in his life? None. All right. Do you think he was a better person or a worse person? Like, okay, you're right. So you're forced to reckon with that kind of wisdom. And you don't have to agree, but then he drops this on you. I'm from Detroit. This is him talking. I'm from Detroit. Prison is an extension of my community. You want to fucking step into those shoes and speak for him? How dare you? You can't. Nobody can. I can't speak for you. I can't speak for anybody else. My job is to do a whole lot more shutting up and understanding that I haven't walked your walk. I haven't walked his walk. Prison's an extension of your community.
Yeah,
Fuck.
It's absolutely something we create as a society. The public, again, doesn't want to recognize. And for the listeners, again, I'm going to give the award for the deep question or maybe the deep answer to Pete on this episode because we have a running game of who gets the prize for the deep academic question. But that was some philosophical shit, man. And what's really interesting about that statement is that the voice, who's going to be the voice for this group? Who's going to be the voice for that? Right. And a lot of people are really intimidated by that, I think. And I'll share a personal story with me about the Veterans Day article that I just wrote in USA Today called, Thank You for Killing. Man, it really set some people off. And I got some great responses back. But I also got some even from our own community saying that I work in this field, I work in this branch of the government, and I talked to some of the contemporaries about your article, and someone said, well, Scott doesn't speak for me as a veteran. Scott doesn't speak for me as a Marine. And I responded back with every ounce of resistance that I could, but I had to respond back because I normally don't feed into the poison. But this wasn't poison. This was a really well put question. It was very cordial. It was respectful. I think it was probably not going to be a guy put the R/S, like respectfully submitted. Yeah. And I said, you know what? I never suppose or assume that I am the voice of the veteran community. I'm not. I never say that I am standing on some pulpit saying I speak for all veterans. I'm just a guy that likes to share stories, and I share my opinions. And that's what they are, is opinions. And when it's called an op-ed, it's an opinion editorial, meaning I write it. It's based on my opinion. Some guy chops on it, or girl, and they publish it. But again, that in and of itself, just like whatever you say or whatever guests you have on the show and you ask them these pointed questions, the responses you get don't necessarily have to be things you agree with.
Yeah.
But you have to be that type of person that can really put it in perspective and understand that the human dynamic is so diverse that as you get older and you gain this wisdom and experience, which is one of the great things I love about your shows, is that you balance that and understand that you become a better person by understanding that and allowing those perspectives. But that story that I just told was just one example that I wanted to reiterate, I think, for my own selfish purposes, if nothing else, to say that I don't ever say I'm some prophet like for the veteran community or get up here and speak, but I feel that if I don't do it, who will?
Yeah.
You have to have that capacity to hit the enter button on your computer and send that out into the ionosphere and send it out into the airwaves or whatever the medium is that you communicate your message. That takes courage.
It does.
Just like standing on a stage on Broadway and exposing yourself, trying to pretend to be something you're not. We're so much different because we're sharing a bit of ourselves and we're also helping people share a little bit more of themselves. So how do you get people as an interviewer to share more of themselves based off of the research you've done of other great interviewers?
So a lot of this stuff is based on my own tools that I've developed from talking to thousands of people in conflict zones. They don't have to give me anything. They can absolutely tell me the same thing they always say, and I'll likely leave. But that's not my job. My job is to find out what the commander doesn't know he doesn't know. Like there's a whole list of questions. I always talk about this. There's 100 questions that I could answer at any point in time that may or may not be the right answer. Who knows? And that stuff's important. But what really matters is when I come back to the commander and say, you're putting these efforts forward, and here are the outcomes that I can find, right? So to do that, you have to listen to the person's answer and then say, that's all surface truth, first thought, pre-programmed, kind of like their mantra, what they would always say to whatever that question is. If you can take that person and encourage them to, and I try not to manipulate, but when I was younger, that was the tool I had, was manipulation. But like we talked to Robin
So
Drake.
what's manipulation, though, so people can understand? Like, give an example of manipulating someone.
I would take control of the conversation with the right kind of questions to get control. Like I would ask a closed question: is this or that? Yes or no? And it's a lot more. It works, but it's harder to get that person to relax and drop their barriers if you're controlling something, obviously. Like if someone asks me, like if someone's in a political argument with me and they ask me a closed question, I'm like, that's a closed question. What are you trying to control? Where are you trying to go? So if I'm thinking that, I have to assume the person I'm talking to will think the same thing. So I just take them and I take them out of their linear timeline, kind of bouncing across the surface of the lake. And I say, go back to this. You said this. Tell me more about that. Now they have to dive down deep. And then once we're diving down deep, then I can take them left or right in that depth or three-dimensionally and say, give me an example of that. Give me an example when that didn't work. Give me an example from your neighbor. And I can look for these things where now they're no longer on the surface. They're pulling deep from their memory. And I'm asking them about their opinion on things, and that gets them to release a lot of that. I'm already in the door, basically. I'm inside the house, and I'm kind of looking around, and I'm asking them questions about things they want to answer. Hey, tell me about your flag up there. What is that? Like you have no ability except for to say, oh, that's the gunner from the company that commanded when I was in Ramadi. Let me tell you about it. You have to. There's a whole litany of things that I can take and use in there, and I'm no longer on the surface of your brain. I'm deep into it.
So as you've evolved and gotten more experience and more wisdom, how do you take those from those closed questions to something deper?
I try to look for, and I learned some of this from Mark Valley, I try to look for emotional cues. What were you thinking, or what did I think they were thinking? And I try to put the question in an emotional frame. Like we're talking to Jimmy Fitz today, and it was like, you have had these 10 or so friends die. What would they want you to be doing on a day-to-day basis? Trying to look for the emotional tie, because now he has those friends with him. They just showed up.
They showed up today. That was great.
So I'm looking to do that. because that is uncommon to get that kind of response in a way that's not manipulative and not salacious. I don't need salacious. Jimmy's interesting just because of who he is.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need salacious. Tim Kennedy is a good example of someone who you can go salacious because he'll say provocative shit that I frankly don't agree with. And
you can say words like waterboarding, opinion given.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. PTSD. You get over that shit. Like, okay, that's great. But, and also, you know, he's, I don't want to unfairly characterize him, but it's all I can do right now. So, he is immature in his approach to conflict. It's not all killing. It just can't be. Yeah, you're a Green Beret. Let's be honest with what you guys do. You guys mostly partner with other people. And like all operators, you will have more conversations than you will shoot bullets. So if your answer is bullets and killing, you probably have some evolutions to go through.
Yeah. So how does that use that analogy from, you know, something from that extreme to achieve an effect, whether it's bullets and killing, you achieve an objective is the end state for eliminating something, to how you evolve in what you do now. Does that make sense?
Ask me again in another way.
Yeah. So how does using that analogy from what you just gave from, you know, killing people and achieving an objective, how do you get around that to find a different way to achieve your end state?
Okay. I'm a big believer, and I've seen this done and I've used it, is creating an affect over an effect. Because the affect will yank the effect along with it. You just killed 15 people. Well, let me see what the response to stimuli is, which is the noun version of affect, right? What's the response to stimuli? Well, everybody here is terrified of the S. Like we use the example all the time in stories where they talk about the police on one side of the river and on the other side are a special operations guy. They come across and they're snatching guys in the middle of the night. We're trying to teach Iraqis about due process. And you're snatching motherfuckers out of their bed. They're sleeping. Innocent people are sleeping in trenches. Not wanting to get arrested. So now you got men not in their home, terrified for their families. They're sleeping in irrigation ditches, hiding, you know, and it's like none of that is the desired impact in a place that's trying to become normal. The specter of war is way worse than the reality of it in modern conflict, from my experience. The specter is way worse. Now, there are times like when you guys are in a full pitch battle in Ramadi. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the other places where the conflict is spiky, you know, where it's like, there's war today, now there's not. There's war today, now there's not, you know, that kind of thing. And so you can't have that approach. So if you don't lead with an effect, if you can't design an effect and figure out if you can create it, then you are only left with effects. And I'll tell you right now, effects fail all the time. So that's, I think, the approach that I try to take is what impact emotionally are you creating with what you do? And it tempers what I do now.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero, co-host of the Break It Down show and fellow producer here at Lions Rock Productions. And I'm proud to announce our newest show coming in January. It's called Justice. Season 1 is going to be a deep dive into some of the cases I personally worked on as a licensed private investigator, and you'll get a unique view into the criminal justice system that may just challenge some of your personal notions about how it should work and open your eyes in ways you never imagined. So keep your ears open for Justice, a brand new podcast coming in January from Lions Rock Productions to iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
So that's, I think, the approach that I try to take is what impact emotionally are you creating with what you do? And it tempers what I do now.
Yeah, now I'm thinking back of all the interviews we did or that we conducted together. Like, how was Pete trying to mind fuck me using his spy-like powers? I don't think I'm sharp enough to figure that out, but that's probably just ego.
Most of the time, I'm lost.
I think that you probably play on ego a lot too. Like,
sure,
when you pull those emotional pieces that people connect to, not only in combat, which is we've talked about that enough. We don't need to bore listeners with that, but using those emotional pieces, those things that you use, the example, the picture of my Marines on the wall or whatever it is in the setting that you do to pull that emotional response. And a lot of the interviews you do are in person, which we agree are always the best.
Yeah.
Like today, we're interviewing motocross legend, plank owner of the whole industry almost, Jimmy Fitzpatrick. We're at, he lives across the street from me. This phenomenal setting, and it's so comfortable when you're in that setting because you can pull those pieces because everyone feels comfortable at home. We're at my home right now, and Pete's been here plenty of times. But so talk about when we do a remote interview, when it's a computer screen or Skyping or Zooming someone in, and how do you read about a person, you know a little bit about them. We do a lot of research on people before we go into an interview because we want to respect that person. We want to you have to respect the person that you're interviewing him and, understand that their time is so valuable. How do you do that remotely? What are the things that people that want to do this, or even some of the people you've interviewed understand, like, oh, wow, Pete was doing this. This is how he did that.
I mean, we're looking for those questions that make them go, oh, wow, and try to get that different response where they have to actually access their brain or it makes them respond. I mean, I'm looking for a question that's less obvious, but not silly. Like, how do you get this person to think about this? And people don't realize what they know in terms of as they say things like, wait, hold on, you just skipped a huge thing. You have this incredible experience. What happened 5 minutes before that? Like, what were you thinking about? And like, oh yeah, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. And then you get these incredible stories like we just did and just posted Andrew Bernstein. And he was talking about how he was a Brooklyn Jewish kid going to UMass, taking pictures for the sports paper, and he ends up becoming a photographer. He's like, but I was fooling around. I was just doing stuff. We had a daily paper, so I'm taking pictures. I don't know what I was doing. I was doing it, but that was it. And so he's like, I have to do something else. So, I started going to Pasadena Academy of Art or whatever the school was called, but it's Pasadena. And I'm like, stop. How's a Jewish kid from Brooklyn end up in Pasadena at an art school? That doesn't just happen. And he's like, oh, my sister is Didi Khan. She was Frenchie in Greece. And so you end up in this totally different place by getting him to slow down and go, oh, that is a big thing. That is a big, huge leap. So not granted, that was face to face, but I'm looking for those moments in a conversation where you can grab someone and just turn that conversation around to a different spot where you get them thinking about it. So it's easier when you're face to face.
I think that's unique to you as an interviewer that you don't go out with the aim of trying to pull those things. You go into an interview and those things just kind of drop into your lap, and you have the intuition to understand, like, hold on a second, let's spin the wheel on that a little bit. How gratifying is that also to know that you've really brought some illumination to the person you're interviewing that they never would have thought of in a million years. Like, God, I never took the time to stop and think about the process on how I got here. Because most people think about the end state. Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of that. I mean, completely, because you know this. I think here's the true confession for this interview, which I love giving. Is, and I told you this already, is I'm an emotional person. I've come to grips with that. Like a lot of the things I do in life, a lot of the decisions I make are emotionally based, and that's just the person I am. And you kind of evolve into that. And I think not only talking to you and our friendship as has evolved, although it seemed like 10 years, 20, whatever, is, you know, you realize these things as you go along. But when you have that opportunity to make a person stop and say, man, I never really realized about what it took me to get here. What's that like for you as an interviewer?
Yeah, it's incredible. Andrew, again, when he went out to New York to visit his sister while she was making grease, he said he had an epiphany. Well, that's a big life-changing moment. We're not going past that. Like, stop. Let's get into that moment. And then one of the things that I've picked up is my my interaction, what I'm feeling, and where I'm drawing these things from, and my ego. Like there's all kinds of times when I want to ask, I want to ask this question, but I've learned to shut up more and really save those questions or stories for when I want to do something with them, you know. And it's hard. It takes a lot of discipline because I always want to butt in. I always want to, you know, do it. Oh, and then this happened, and a lot of that stuff does creep out, but I'm a lot more emotional about a lot more things now as I've shared these incredible things with people. You know, and when Shaka and I are talking, and I talk about getting off the X and how critical that is for us. We're always looking for the X so we can not even get on it. And then once we're on it, doing everything we can to get off. And he's like, there's X's everywhere in the hood. Like, yeah, I bet. And they're not easily marked. And then you think about that, and I feel so, not badly, but I feel the weight of that conversation. And even right now, it makes me emotional, you know, and I think about that. Or I think about our friend across the way who's got this diagnosis and the world that he's in. And like the first thing these guys think of is how do I help the next person in line?
Yeah.
How do I start a foundation and start raising money for, probably not for me, you know, but for 5 guys from now? That's like the first thing they think of. And it's such a beautiful thing, and it makes me emotional like I've never been before because you experience this in real time.
See, you base your profession off of talking and asking questions. So I'll just ask you kind of an open-ended question. This is kind of Ratheresque.
I love it.
Listening.
Yeah, well, I'm guilty of not always listening. You know, you can be really good at listening, so good at interviewing that you don't have to listen all the time. And I know what the next simple question is, and I miss the golden questions because I'm tweeting. I'm not fully present. I mean, you know, and I'll allow myself that those are advanced level interview skills to be that present all the time and to not be distracted. I've tried to do less of the social media stuff during, but then I will absolutely forget about the camera, you know, so my monitor, I've had to turn it more towards that listening thing. It's a challenge. And then also ignoring my ego at the same time while I listen because I get all and then my ego is talking to me and that's distracting me from listening because there's real important words in there. But that's my answer to listening. The listening question is it's very hard to do at the level that I want to do it at. Doesn't mean I'm not listening. I don't want to say that, but there are times when I certainly could listen more. And then and here's why I know. When I edit the shows, because I edit all the shows, I'm like, I don't even remember him saying this. I missed these key questions. You know, the interview's still great. You guys would never know, but I know. So yeah, that's my answer to listen.
The obvious follow question to that would be regrets on editing. On editing, but we won't go there. That's an inside, rather esoteric discussion. But in the same vein, so what is the golden question? Like, what does that look like to you?
It's unknown. You have to be prepared for it. And that means you have to have several things. When I would do combat questions, right, I would have a number of magazines of questions, farmer questions, you know, basic PIR information request questions, you know, all these different things. And so you're ready with the right question system and conversation. So that means a lot of out loud, crazy person walking around the camp conversations, you know, where I'm like, well, then I would want to say this. And, you know, and I backwards plan these conversations out. That level of detail is not required with what we do here. That level of detail is required because I'm not going to go out with you and your company and be fucking around for 1 second. I'm going to be as prepared as I can be. And there'll be no doubt that like Pete's ready every single time. Different world though. So here, when it comes to that, I don't know, the art of asking questions in this case is different. I'm kind of off topic now. But the questions that I want to ask come from my experience for sure in thousands of interviews, you know, so there's questions, but those golden things, they're obvious to me when I see them and I'm like, oh, this is epiphany. Stop. No one knows about this. And if they do know that epiphany story because he's told that, I can get a lot more detail out of that.
So what is it that you think that most listeners, you could even relate this to back, and again, I don't want to go down this avenue about combat, but you can relate to like the type of questions you pull out to give the commander this. So at this stage where we're here now, what is it that you really want to pull out that you want to share with people, the listeners?
Well, I mean, uncommon things, right? So,
what's uncommon to you?
Well, that's
let me not subscribe to the Pete Turner. Like, wait for it, because I've been getting great coaching from Pete on interview skills, which is hugely applicable to what I do as a writer, and just waiting for the answer instead of interrupting and being a chatterbox that I'm prone to be, and being a better listener. But what is that?
Well, there's a couple things. One. That whole thing with fear, right? Like having my ego be subordinate to the conversation. That's conquering fear. The not worrying about the fear of silence, letting that become comfortable. That's a miscomfort. I need to be comfortable with silence. So all of these things feed into that. I also have to be comfortable that I don't always know what's gold. Someone else is going to go, holy shit. And I'll give you an example. Jason McEnroth, he's basically as old as us. Probably show number 3, no more than show number 6. Early on, he played drums with Henry Rollins and was a professional drummer for years in Blue Man Group. And he passed on. He had prostate cancer. But in the last, I think, month, maybe even, one of his sons, who were like joined the Army age, and one was younger, a couple of years, 5 years ago. But now they're men, right? And like, hey, I found this show. I didn't even know it existed, and it's my dad talking. Like one of the last things he ever did publicly, And I didn't know that gold was there.
Man, we were talking before the show about great interviewers, and we were talking about the Kenny Rogers interview with Dan Rather and the pointed question he asked him about his kids. And to think about that really just made me pause and think about what I do. And I think in this day and age of social media, I mean, the thousands of things I've posted, the hundreds of interviews that I've done, that my daughter in my absence would be able to click and listen back in and get some real introspection. Is that the right word? Introspection? Introspective? I think introspective. As a writer, my vocabulary should be much better. But
that's what editors are for.
Yeah, that may be the multiple interviews I've done today. Regardless, to have that ability to there's a library of information about your dad or about your mom or someone you were friends with. Yeah. And he said, man, I never, ever heard them say that. And this guy, Pete Turner,
right,
from Benicia, California,
got
them to say this. And throughout my whole life, I never heard them say that. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I do think about that.
The second and third order effects, Pete.
All right, that's exactly what we're talking about. So yeah, this is gold. I know this is gold, and this will always be interesting. But this other question where they say something, or I spark some memory in them, and they just go off on a tangent about the thing. It's part of the show. It's part of what that moment is. That's why I like the beauty of the conversation over necessarily the interview, where it's kind of like you kind of walk that line. It's a conversation. It's a wonderful conversation, and you want people to lean in and go, wow, that's fascinating.
I think what's cool about that is, for anyone listening to this episode, is that we've talked about who we get on the show, who we interview, how we elicit questions, but the subtext of that, and again, those second and third order effects, that we're creating something here that is just, it's out there forever in this day and age. You can't forget about this technological age that we live in, and the fact that although you may not be writing a volume of a book that goes on a shelf that can come and go, this thing called the internet that the kids are all talking about, it's not a fad, people. This thing is here, and it is here to stay. It's only going to continue to grow. And these small pieces, these small 50, 60-minute episodes that people share of their lives is there for everyone to listen to forever.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to go away.
I don't think so either. And when I think about the time that I would spend, and there's nothing wrong with watching TV, but the time that I've spent my life doing that, or I might be, if I would have spent half that time doing something more productive. And again, nothing wrong with that. But if you've seen Cheers, you've seen every episode of Big Bang Theory. If you've seen every episode of Big Bang Theory, you've seen every episode of Friends. You know, like the jokes are the same, the stories are the same. And largely that's true about these conversations, but there's so much more context and dynamicism in these conversations.
Well, think about that in the grand scheme of things as far as those people who are committed to entertaining or telling stories or reporting news or being a journalist, is how differently their minds are geared on what their priorities are. And the other vast segment of the public who love to watch every single episode of this, they binge watch this, Netflix this. That's how they consume. That's how they process their life, or that's how they balance their life with the job they have, what they want to do, what they never got to do. And I think some people who are in a unique position, and I feel very fortunate to be in this position, that we can eliminate those. I just call them distractions at this point of my life, where I'm lucky if I watch a couple cool shows that I maybe DVR or Netflix, and that's my entertainment to just kind of disconnect. But my real passion is connecting to those people in those shows, or those people that watch those shows or contribute, and how it affects them. That's the story. Again, to use that word subtext again, is those are the stories that really, I think, are the most important to engage people. What do you think about that?
When you were saying that, I wasn't listening. No, I was.
The golden question escaped Pete.
But I was thinking about when you said that, it made me think about a guy I met yesterday. We had coffee, and if someone invites you to coffee, I'm going to say yeah. You're like, yeah, of course. It's a veteran. He's an officer, and he's getting a PhD, and he was talking about some guru in his part of the PhD world, and he's like, I'd love to be on the show, and I'm like, well, of course we'll have you on the show. Like, you have something to say, you're interesting, and he's like, well, have you read this guy's book? And I'm like, no, but let's just get him on the show, and it blew his mind. Like, the Air Force officer, retired guy's like, wait, we can get this huge guru? And I'm like, of course, and if not him, there's 5 like him from that field. One of those people is going to say yes and open a door where you get to have a conversation. So now not only are you reading the book, but you're applying real-time interaction to this person that you find wonderful, So, yeah, I don't need distractions. Granted, I watch Survivor, which is kind of a human interaction show.
Is that show still on?
Yeah, and I love the editing. I love the editing.
No idea that show is still on.
Yeah, it's my...
What season is it?
I don't even keep track.
I just 45.
Yeah, it's something that
crazy.
That my lady and I do together.
My lady,
and
Renaissance man.
That's right.
My lady,
and we also, on occasion, she and I will watch TV together, but it's less about distraction, more about timed interaction. Even though it's kind of a, we'll talk about the show for days afterwards, but. Yeah, that ability to take that person in real life and really put them down in front of you and have a conversation. And then to take them and put them into an environment where I love what we did with Michelle Rigby-Assad. Field spy, CIA spy, field commander, and then talking about, the virtual her that would be on your shoulder. And you're like, I just have to trust that virtual CIA person who I don't know exists, this information's good. And I'm going to put my dudes in harm's way based on that. And she's thinking, the virtual Scott on her shoulder. She's like, I owe this guy the best that I've got.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a great conversation.
Yeah, that was something too. Again, that just really fell into our lap. That show with Michelle, where not only is she wrote a great book and she had all this life experience, she's still doing it to this day, but it really exposed itself during that episode of the connection that we had. Again, it was kind of almost like we were pen pals in a combat environment where I was sending this type of information. It was being received and it was heard and I was getting a response, but I didn't really know the person that it was coming from.
Right.
Yeah, that is really where you invite people on the show and these magical things, not to sound too Disneyland, but they do happen.
Yeah.
It's really something that is extraordinary that comes out of doing a show like this. So I'd have to say, I don't know, to shift gears.
Yeah.
Interviews that you want to do in the next 100 episodes.
Oh,
people,
Yeah.
stories that you want to grab.
So there are so many, but there's one I'm really excited about, and it's booked, and John's going to do it, and I think John's perfect for it. It's this guy named, his rap name is X-Rated, and that's what you have to look at. X-Raid, like I'm going to raid the compound, X-Rated. And he and some friends killed some people. They went to jail for murder, and he says he didn't do it, but the 40-something-year-old him who's been in jail for 20-plus years says, I didn't do the killing, but I went there to harm those people, and I deserve my time in jail. So you've got this culpable guy who's also an artist, and he's been rapping the entire time that he's been in prison, putting his raps over the prison payphone to his friend. They record it and put out an album, and he's a signed act.
Wow.
Yeah. So this guy's, I have to know about this guy. I have to understand and he's out now, right? And he's out, but he's limited travel, cannot go to the area where he killed the people, because that's just, we don't do that. So, and I don't mean you don't do that, and like you shouldn't, like he's not allowed. Like you're staying in this area where he lives, and that's where you stay until we get more comfortable with you being out and about. So having this person talk about the entire process of all of it, I'm really looking forward to that conversation, and John's going to kill it. It's perfect for him. He'll really pull out a great show. And some people talk to him, but they go for the sensational part. There's so much more interesting stuff with that guy.
What about all the high-vis people that you haven't gotten on the show? Do you re-engage with those people, or you just kind of leave them in the wake? No.
It's my job to be persistent. I know not everybody does that, but my job is to, like, I want you on the show. I'm not kidding. Like, I really do. I'll be back. And when we look, I want Tom Hanks. I haven't figured out a good bridge to him directly, but once he comes on, it'll be so natural and easy. He'll be like, yeah, I don't know why we didn't do this a long time ago. So you either have time to build the bridge or you don't. You don't really control that. So I'm just going to keep on doing it. But I would love to have, Tom Hanks, and there's a bunch of musicians we're about to get that, we're super close to getting Jimmy Jam. And there's nobody bigger in music than Jimmy Jam, So when we talk about names, we don't always get all of them, but we always get people that are incredible, and they all know each other. So you build a network, and the next thing
I think we were talking about before the show too. One of the things both you and I are, I guess, guilty of is follow-up. How we get so consumed with the multitude of requests that we have, the people that ask us for things and beg of our time, and you try and prioritize, and you want to answer everything, and we don't write those things down, and we're bad at this. And I mean, we've talked so many times about, we're going to get this person on the show, we're going to get this. I think one of them was Coolio.
Yeah.
And I shared that great story with you. Like, I was a lieutenant in 29 Palms. I went to Big Bear, and I'm skiing, and I had bologna sandwiches with Coolio at his stretched out Suburban that said Coolio.com on it. I'm like, this guy is a veteran. Surely he'll want to come on the show. We put the request out, but I've never done the follow-up.
Yeah.
I think I did a follow-up, but I didn't hear anything back. So Coolio, if you're listening, we want you on the Break It Down show, and it's going to be great. But, yeah, it's really tough to manage your time and to follow up. So I think that most people that are probably listening don't understand, too, that you've got wants that not only, I think for you and for me, it's you really want to grab these stories, but you also struggle with the fact that is it attainable?
Yeah.
I mean, do you ever feel like this is just not going to happen?
We have a bridge to Rob Lowe. When Rob Lowe is ready to talk about something, he will.
Rob Lowe.
Yeah, pretty Rob Lowe, exactly. You know.
Yeah.
And he'll do national level media because that's what he knows. And I'm positive that if he's in a mood to talk, you know, we are something like that he would come talk to. You know, so maybe I need 3 different people leaning on him saying, oh yeah, Pete's a good guy. So I don't think it's impossible to get almost anybody as long as they're willing to talk. I mean, if the person's just not going to talk to anybody, then, you know, like the guy who writes Game of Thrones. I've tried to reach out to that guy. He just doesn't want to talk to anybody. So, but that's fine. You know, I'll still send a thing every now and then, you know, and it'll work out or it won't, you know?
Yeah. Well, I see that's something that just came to light too, is a good friend of mine who saw my daughter being born while I was in Baghdad. She is a amazing person, Karen Walsh. Love you, Karen. I'll send you this episode so you get a shout out. She went to college with Pete Dinklage.
Yeah.
And I guess she still like has, you know, some correspondence with him maybe, but like, you know, it's this type of connection. It's, you know, what we call in the military combined arms.
Yes.
We're going to provide some indirect fire. We're going to keep their heads down, and then we're going to send some machine gun fire, and they can make a decision.
Yeah.
They can either run away from the bombs dropping on their head and expose themselves, or be shot down by the machine gun fire. But one way or the other, you're going to make contact.
I've got intersecting fields of fire.
Yes.
And also joint ops too, because I'll take like Wes Maybe, who lives in London and is a music producer / engineer, and he'll say, oh, you know what? I want to have so-and-so on the show. Okay, let's do it. Let's book them. I've told you, like, just book them. And same thing with this Andrew Bernstein guy. He gets all these legends from sports. He's had Kareem on his show. He's had Nolan Ryan on his show. But yeah, when you have someone in your life who doesn't fit that mold, you should bring him on my show. And he's like, I'd never thought about that.
So who's going to be on this show next 100 episodes? Who's like your top 10 lineup that
I hope we get
people can tune into and say, hey man, the Break It Down show, I got to put that, I got to save that as a favorite on my my iPhone. I got to put that as a bookmark on my
100
computer.
Shows, it's so the next 100 shows. Okay, I'm hoping that we get Dee Dee Khan, because how great would that be to talk to her about being on Grease and then barely talk about that again and talk about what it's like to be, you know, an actress in Hollywood for the last 40 years. She was on 72 different episodes of Benson, you know, so she's got a career outside of Grease, so surely she wants to talk about that. But that would be incredible. I would love to get David Foster. We're close enough to start to ask now. But he's a very busy dude. That's the other thing, is you have to respect how busy these guys are. And then twice now we've almost had Danny Trejo. It just hasn't worked out because he's super busy, and, you know, I want to sit in a room with Danny Trejo and talk to him. I don't want to talk to him on the phone like it's a 15-minute phoner for the radio. Mm-hmm. That doesn't do anybody any good. You know, like this. That's that format. That's not this format.
I think you've done radio shows. I've done a couple 100 radio shows in the last year.
Yeah.
It is a really different dynamic, too, because when you go into that type of forum, you got to get your message out in 7-minute segments, if that.
Yeah.
And I think some listeners love that type of, you know, pizzicato.
Yeah.
They want information in and out. And then there's others that really are tuned into this podcast medium that is taking over.
Yeah.
It's only going to get better. And you're only going to get bigger, and really getting underneath the skin, really taking that and scraping beneath the surface to get people to share what they hadn't thought of beyond getting their message out, in 7 minutes, because you just can't do that.
Yeah.
And that's where people battle when you're selling a product, you're selling your brand, you're selling your movie, you're selling this, is like, I need to capitalize on this because this is my business. If I don't talk about this in 7 minutes, I'm wasting valuable airtime. And that's a decision that people have to make. I could have gone off on many tangents and talked about the emotional things and some esoteric things about what was important about writing my story and sharing this and doing that. But what was important was this. And there's also responsibilities you have to other people, like your publisher, your producer. So I think that's an interesting thing. And
those interviews also tend to get canned, where you're like, this is the interview I'm doing. This is my 7-minute pitch, And so not all the time for everybody, but if you're on a press tour and you're doing Mike Huckabee, this person, that, you're going to say the same things a lot.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I remember when we launched the book, when we launched Echo In Ramadi on Fox and Friends with Kilmeade, and my publicist, she just my Google Calendar looked like it had been hit with a 12-gauge shotgun with birdshot. It was nuts. And I was literally locked in my hotel room in New York City doing back-to-back interviews. There was at least 20, 25 interviews. It was insane. And there were all these 7-minute sound bites. And if it was good enough, they'd say, hey, can you hold on the line and do another one? And you'd have to say, no, I can't, because I got to jump on this other show, man. Yeah. And you feel bad because you want to elaborate, you want to tell a story, but it's really something, that you don't prepare yourself for.
The other thing about all of that is, like, you tell the story of Libby and how impactful his passing is in the story. And you guys open basically with that. Like, you open with that in the book, basically. Like, this happens fast. And in the next segment, holiday gift guide. Like, wait a second. Yeah. We just covered this kid's death, and I'm almost in tears, and it doesn't work, right? Like, you have to, like, you and I could explore this in an hour long and talk about, the time you guys went out for secret shots because the commander could never be. But, and I'm just making these things up. But you could have a whole story of why this guy was so important to everybody, because you talked to everybody about it. And there's no holiday gift guide segment 7 minutes later to totally change gears.
I think there's a place for that that's going to be sustained in what we used to call terrestrial radio, which in and of itself has morphed into podcasts. You can restream it, you can listen to it again, it's on demand, whatever the medium is, it's there. But when you want to click on a certain topic to learn about a certain person, or you want to learn about a certain story or a certain piece of history, you're going to click that button and you're going to tune into the Break It Down show and listen to Pete Turner talk to, gratuitous plug, Sebastian Younger.
Oh, nice.
He's got to get a plug in every show we do. That guy is legendary. We love Sebastian. Just to be connected to that guy, because, we love his work. He's so instrumental in sharing great stories and what he does, but people want to click on that. They want to go to the Break It Down show. They want to go to Pop the Bubble, and they want to understand the full story. And you may be only capable of listening to 7 minutes of one segment, but you got a meeting where you got to get out of your car, but you can come back to that.
Yeah.
And that's what's so powerful about this podcast, is that it's always going to be there.
It's always there. And then, it's my job to always put someone in front of you who you didn't realize you wanted to know more about. And then hopefully, I don't think Sebastian realizes how seriously I took that tasking of gathering people in the middle, like, help us out. Like, we've had people that are extremely left leaning, and I purposely avoid certain political things when I talk. I'm not afraid of politics, but I don't want to highlight a person because they're left leaning or because they're right leaning. I want to highlight them because they're incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that makes people go, oh, well, that guy didn't talk about how he loves or hates Donald Trump, because it's not about Donald Trump anyhow. It's about life, you know. If you're worried about Donald Trump, go hug your kid. You know, go do something else with that time. I'm begging you, take your special someone to the opera and watch incredible people at world-class performers perform for you. And do that and take your special someone. I'm begging you to do that instead of go see Donald Trump. I mean, just on TV.
How important it is to gain that perspective. How important is it to you as you gain experience and you're so inundated by different people of different talents, of different backgrounds, to expose yourself to those different types of mediums? Like you were just posting, you and your lady went to the opera, and to experience that. And I think really the question I'm getting at is, if Pete Turner had to tell the listeners what to do better to make your lives better on this episode, what are those things?
Yeah, worry about less stuff that you can't control. I mean, tend to your own fucking grass. You know, quit looking at my grass. Quit looking at anybody. Get some goddamn business.
Pete's lawn sucks, by the way, but it sucks bad. Yeah. But he's got pomegranates.
That's right.
You got citrus.
Lemons are coming in right now.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like, if you're so involved and if you know so much about the Mueller case, you're either stoked or sad. I would suggest you invest that time into something that lifts you up. I'd spend that time with people that you love. We all take like, I don't want to take things for granted. We all have things that we can't even help but take for granted. You know, there's electricity in the house. You know how rare that is in most of the rest of the world. I mean, come on. At any point in time, fresh water everywhere. You know, just so many things. So take out the people in your life that you are already taking for granted. We all do it. I take my mom for granted all the time, my brother too, you know, and spend more time with those folks, because that's infinitely more important, you know, than doing that. You've got friends you haven't seen enough, go see them. Go out to lunch. Go take them out to dinner. Get out of the house for 25 minutes. Don't watch TV and just go have a chat with your person that you love. That's what I would say. Just more interaction with each other and less thumbs on screens and less hate on the TV, because that's what a lot of those TV shows sell, is hate.
Yeah, it is a real challenge to break away from social media, to break away from the TV, and really interact with people. I think I suffer from it. There's an absolute creeping addiction to think, I haven't been on here, I haven't given followers this, I have a responsibility to do this, and to appropriately manage your time for what's important in life. Yeah. And I think that is really probably the most prophetic thing that you could have said during this episode.
I think we're all guilty of it, right? Like, you and I are in a social media world where it's part of our trade, you know, and you have to do it to some extent, but yeah, you have to.
I think that's really cool in the fact that one of the things listeners may not understand about you as a person, as a podcaster, talking about being sucked into that social media world, that virtual world that most people live in, or you see them on the train in their phone, they won't look at people on the bus or in a lobby, is that you take the time to drive around the state of California, out of the state of California, to conduct these interviews in person. I think that is really important, because you have to extricate yourself from your comfort zone and understand that I got to do this. I feel safe here. I feel comfortable. I'm insulated. But you force yourself to leave.
Yeah.
And get out and really interact with people. And then every time you say, oh, I don't want to do this, but you force yourself to do it, the product becomes better. Just like today with Jimmy on the dock, and being there and connecting with people and seeing the environments they live in, that's power.
Yeah.
That's real power.
It is. It is. What have you picked up from these the shows that you've done? You've done quite a few. I don't even know the number anymore. You've done so
Pete's
many.
turning the table on me now. What have I picked up on this is the most important thing I've probably learned is the value of friendship, to be quite honest, and not to get too emotional and teary-eyed, but to really look back and think that our friendship over this last year, which seems so much longer,
right,
has evolved so quickly that I love it that we call each other, we communicate, we're involved in projects together, and I think it's all based off of a common goal to share great stories and to really spread that to so many people that don't have exposure to some of the really unique facets of different people's lives that we're so very fortunate to be invited into.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is one of the most remarkable things, that we're allowed to come to people's homes and ask them strange questions, put them on the spot, and then they give us answers, and we can promote it and share that with total strangers.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of people whom we've never met is just
people in other countries.
Yeah. Other countries. This is international, where you're really making a difference and shedding light on so many great topics, so many great people that they never would have had the opportunity to see. And I think that you're sitting in your living room, you're watching a TV show, and you see this celebrity, or you see this public figure, or you see this PhD, this professor, and you think, man, I'd really like to get to know more about him. But you have that opportunity if you tune into the Break It Down show or pop in the Buffalo. I mean, you're gonna get that. I think that's what I've gained from this. Not just the involvement in the project of what you do, but the friendship that you and I have cultivated and sustained. I think it takes work.
It does.
I mean, we both have really demanding schedules, and we always answer the phone normally when we're not on the phone with someone else. We always return calls. Yeah. We rarely leave voicemail messages, and I think that's something that I liken to being a kid again. Like, you've got a guy that you're connected to where you can just stop over and say, hey, you want to hang out? Yeah, let's hang out. There's no, hey, let's schedule a phone call for 3 p.m. on Thursday. I've got 15 minutes. There's none of that shit. It's always accessible, and I respect that, and I value that. Same.
It's good stuff. What did we do here? Are we doing all right? Awesome. Thanks for doing episode 400 with me.
Yeah, I tell you, the centennial episodes, man, I'm privileged to be a part of. My only, to Dan Rather you, my only regret is that we didn't meet sooner.
Well, that's fine. We got plenty of time left.
We do.
Yeah. No, I love it.